The Prime Cryptek activated the Innertech protocol through his interstitial link. The Cyclopean doors slid silently open, much belaying their inconceivable size. The Cryptek was stooped. He leaned heavily on his staff as he walked through the entrance. Before him was a 200-cubit-high containment vessel. The writhing, fragmented monstrosity inside floated in the void of containment. The greater mass of the being formed and seemed to watch him as he walked.
Containment confirmed. Metaphysical bonds confirmed as efficient.
The Scribe Lord murmured to the Cryptek. The Cryptek nodded his pleasure at the report and turned his burning yellow oculobe upwards to the trillion fragments floating in the tank.
Containment must last perpetually. Much has been sacrificed to contain this being.
The word being was said with audible disgust.
The sacrifices will not be in vain, Lord. The Eternal One is contained and will be contained until such a time as a means of true extermination has been discovered.
The being in the tank whirled in utter frenzy, like a sandstorm, its macro particles bouncing ineffectually against the non-glass of the tank.
If I may, Lord Cryptek, should the being ever escape, recontainment has a possibility of failing in 99.99% of cases. Should the Eternal One infect one machine, the sacrifices will have been for naught.
Then pray, my dear scribe, that it never escapes. Its consciousness is almost beyond our understanding. Billions have been purged due to the taint of this creature.
The Cryptek took several more steps and rested, leaning slightly against the scribe. They had been friends during the flesh times, and some bond still remained, though neither truly remembered it in full detail.
Our watch must never end, old friend.
The huge, black stone doors began to shut at the press of the single button upon the Alpha 1 override and sealing command terminal. The Cryptek and his scribe would spend forever in this chamber, standing guard over a being that could never be allowed to escape. As the doors close for the last time, the room falls dark, every light fades, all save the lights that burn eternally in the chests of the two Necrons. Lights that pulse dimly where true and fair hearts once beat.
Repent and pray for forgiveness from the God of all machines!
The crowd flailed and moaned in fervent ecstasy as his steel vocal cords ground out the litanies of forgiveness. The choir rattled on, performing their lobotomized duties perfectly. Their song carried across the crowd and the streets of the city. The midday observations were vital to maintaining the souls of the wretched, sinful populace. The Mechanicus had controlled this world for over 7,000 years, and you did not keep a world in working order that long by slacking on prayers. From Tertiary Tower, Reticulus Gamma 1, High Magos Jayuk B10M stared down. His surprisingly human eyes whirled silently, focusing on different faces in the crowd. When a being like Jayuk B10M spoke, you listened, which is exactly what happened. The vast, lofty hall fell silent. 1,000 red eyes focused on Jayak as he began speaking in two voices at once.
The Omnisire guides us in our quest for truth.
His voice was a steel rasp, as if 1,000 needles were dragging along an iron plate. As he spoke High Gothic, he data-shunted streams of formal greetings to various members of the audience. For the sake of tradition, he even sent binary code messages.
Explanation of current circumstance.
It has been 4 Terran days since Production Overseer and High Fabricator Specialist Rotten Precious 9 went missing somewhere in the city below.
He cleared his throat with a cough. Though he had no need to cough, some habits just died hard.
Additional information.
I have combed for the terabytes of recordings, reports, treaties, and have found no trace of him.
Interrogative.
How is that possible?
A murmur spread through the audience. Adept Class 3 Kaivan Forang stood slowly to request permission to speak. B1's compound eyes focused on Forang as he directed his full attention to him.
Requesting explanation for your standing up, Assistant Magos Forain.
Explanation. I'm Magos Jayak. It is within my duty to maintain communications with the on-world Imperial Bastion. Further outline. A captain of the arbitrators, known as Dan Smythe, is requesting that he be allowed to aid in the search for our missing colleague.
A buzz went around the room. Hands tapped and scrawled. Expressions of interest and confusion bounced in the noospheric zone of the room.
Interrogative.
And what, by the Omnisire, would this Mr. Smythe offer us that my Skitarii Prime Enforcers cannot?
Supplication. Explanation. My lord, he is a veteran of several Imperial campaigns. He worked with the Inquisition as an investigator, and just today, we received a missive from Mars.
Silence fell instantly. Every auditory canal and oral receptor opened to full and focused on the young adept.
Extreme interest.
Mars. Explanation demanded.
Forang shifted, uncomfortable under the weight of so many gazes and so much active scrying.
Explanation. Lord, a missive was sent to Smythe explaining that he is to henceforth begin investigations of his own concerning the disappearance. The disappearance has caused emotional concern for a member of the High Council of Terra. It appears that Rotten Precious 9 was well known and well liked.
Outrage! It is beyond the realms of acceptable consideration that an Imperial subject should be treated with such an important mission.
Demand.
Silence, Magos Krosnovov.
The noosphere exploded with outbound, inbound requests. 100,000 messages, pings, pins, and updates were sent out instantly. The room slowly began to build in noise.
Contemplation complete. Mission parameters updated.
Adept Forang will contact this Mr. Smythe and demand he hand over all information. He will report henceforth to me and drop all other duties effective immediately.
Again, the chamber buzzed with binary expressions and vocalizations of shock.
But my lord, this is most irregular that such a young Magos be put in control of such sensitive information. We appreciate your pedigree, but we must express concern, Lord.
Interruption. Explanation.
But nothing. Magos Forang has spent 4 years in contact with the on-world delegation. He can handle this, Mr. Smythe. and will shine the light of the god of all machines.
The room remained a hive of activity as Adept Forang bowed low and expressed the traditional Martian binary expression of thanks.
Command.
Go now, Forang, and begin the twin-headed investigation mission 4956-243-1-XB.
Forang walked from the chamber and left a room that sounded like a hive of steel wasps fighting over copper wire. He slammed the man back again. His head hit the wall with a dull thud, which elicited a groan of pain.
Where is he?
He slammed the man again, causing him to cough and splutter as the air was driven out from his lungs. The soldier let the ganger fall to the floor. He turned about and faced his captain.
He ain't gonna talk.
The captain stood up with a groan. His hip hurt again.
They always talk, Burns, with enough time. And if he won't talk, we'll give him over to the adepts who will servitorize him.
The ganger looked up at them with actual fear in his eyes. You don't have the authority to do that. The captain looked back at the ganger. His false eye captured pics of the swirling face tattoos for the sake of record.
I do, actually. They'll shave all your hair off, laser burn your tattoos, and then electrocute you so your hair won't grow back. Then, they'll remove any unneeded limbs, and then they'll cut your skull open and lobotomize you. And all of that will be done without drugs, because the tech priests aren't ones for wasting resources.
The captain let his words hang in the air. The ganger wiped the drool from his mouth with his hand and stood up on shaking legs. Look, I don't want any problems. I just want to get the hell out of here. Tor is at the North Central lower blocks. He runs his stores out of there. He sells stolen cogitators and data slates after his people wipe them clean. Burns began to step forward when the captain placed a hand on his shoulder.
You see, Burns, he wouldn't lie to us. Because for all he knows, we've been tracking him for weeks, and we'll find him wherever he goes.
I'm not stupid enough to lie to an arbitrator. The words didn't echo off the card brick walls and simply vanished.
I hope not. If I have to see you again, I'll come with the Skitari, and believe me, they don't ask questions. They carve for answers. Now disappear.
The captain pushed the synthwood door open and ushered the ganger out. He ran from the small room and disappeared down the street. Captain Smythe looked Specialist Rob Burns up and down and inquired.
Do you need anything before we go and find Tor?
A night with a neophyte of the Order of the Argent Shroud.
You know, Burns, I like you. But if anyone other than me heard you say that, they'd probably burn you at the stake.
And I'd still get to be close to a neophyte or two at least.
He smiled at Smythe, disarming the tension in the room.
Get your gear from the crawler before we head in. We know he has muscle who have earned their ink.
"36 minutes later, Smythe, Burns, and 13 members of the 15th Arbitrator Investigation and Enforcement Squad, known as the Bare Knuckles, were loaded into the back of the overground transport. They pulled up outside an almost subsided superstack. The black steel structure was covered in posters, graffiti, and other less than savory decorations. Rob Burns may have been a joker, but he was a point man first and foremost. In a dozen campaigns, he had cleared the way for the Guard, and had done so with a lion's bravery and an eagle's eye. There were 45 people gathered around the front of the stack's huge steel doors. The Mechanicus might control the world, but they controlled this building. For now. The 15-man squad walked through the crowd of baleful, staring eyes. Their aggression was obvious, and so much as a single provocation would lead to bloodshed. With Burns at the forefront, the squad walked slowly but surely through the atrium. The loud hailers on the walls had been recoded and blasted Rise Slam, a type of music exclusive to the high-rises of the world. The atrium thumped and shook under the force of the bass. The squad's vox beads activated automatically when external volume became too great to hear each other talk.
Oh, this is a lovely place. I might retire here. Think I could afford it?
One of the arbiters joked, looking at the neon graffiti and the piles of refuse.
On your salary, I doubt it.
Burns replied. He was leading the squad up a neon-painted staircase towards a wide-mouth elevator.
Clear and enter, Burns.
Less than 5 minutes after entering the stack, the squad stepped out onto floor 46. They met no resistance as they walked through the hallway. The doors had all been ripped off, making the whole floor a single, vast open room. Every door except for one. The squad took up breach positions and formed a semicircle around the door, just in case. Smythe knocked on the door. The music faded instantly, and the synthwood slab slowly opened inwards. Inside was a den of crime. The walls were lined with stolen goods, the floors piled high with data slates and the various loot amassed by a crime lord over a long and healthy career. Burns and Smythe walked side by side through the room, their false eyes recording and reporting everything around them as they went.
I'm surprised, Smythe. There's only 15 of you here to greet me.
The voice came from the man sitting at the desk in the other room. He was flanked by 5 other people. People was a tough word to use to describe them, so extensive were their modifications.
I didn't know the cult had signed this pit over to you, Tor.
Torkopat smirked from under his brow.
When you're beneath the contempt of the cult, there's one simple rule. Whoever has the stones wins.
Bold of you to claim that stabbing and robbing and killing equates to having stones.
Smythe replied flatly. He had heard similar speeches before, and there was some truth to them. The cult, as well as the wider Imperium, left a lot of people forgotten and alone. Crime was the only way for some people.
Are you, Captain, claiming that you aren't a gang of killers and thugs?
Tor's retinue chuckled at this, their augmetics flashing and shining in the clean light of the room.
Let me guess. We're the same, just on different sides of the badge. We're not so different. We could work together. Am I missing anything?
Tor's face was still, but his eyes blazed with the mockery.
Tell me why I shouldn't have you killed and thrown into subfloor reprocessors.
The room went cold, all humor gone. The tension became a living thing that fed off fear and misunderstanding.
You've been dealing in stolen Generation 2 Vector-class cogitators. I don't care about any of this. I don't care about your drug running or your second-hand augmetics ring. I want the cogitators, Tor, and I want them now. and I'd rather leave with you and I on good terms than the alternative.
No one moved. No one breathed.
And what is the alternative?
His teeth flashed. A dog like Tor didn't let someone else bark without replying in kind.
Well, the alternative is that I blow your face off and kill all your men, then debt pack this whole floor after seizing everything. Anyone who survives will be handed over to the cult Mechanicus, and I don't need to tell you that no one wins in that situation. Do I, Tor?
Tor's lip curled like an attack dog. Smythe knew Tor's kind well, but he knew that you didn't get to be where Tor was without picking your fights. Tor looked over the arbitrators slowly, measuring each one, their flak armor, their weapons. Then he suddenly relaxed.
Fine. Take 'em. And get the hell out of my building.
Everyone but Tor and Smythe exhaled in relief. Burns's noosphere chimed with positive IDs and active warrants for the gangers in the room. Among them he recognized Tekka, the extortionist and killer, an old foe of his.
Good. I'm glad you didn't choose the alternative, Tor.
After 3 hours, the arbitrator squad had loaded 4 mag trucks with cogitators and set off. As the squad vehicle pulled away, Burns looked up through a window and saw, standing at a blasted entrance to floor 46, a figure staring downwards. Adept Forang floated gracefully through the smog of the city. His plinth hovered along a predetermined, optimized route to the Arbiti's headquarters. He flicked through reams of data on a slate he held in his fourth arm, looking for discrepancies in the theory of non-unified hypergravity and its relation to the use of Geller fields in short-skip warp travel. The plinth slowed as he approached the building. He stepped off, as the wind whipped his robes about him. He soon found himself in a lead-lined investigation room, standing in the middle of 204 stolen cogitator units. The arbitrators didn't speak, even to each other. They all knew tech priests and had dealt with the cult before. But seeing a tech priest, Adept Magos, this close was not a normal everyday experience. The thin, almost reptilian man in red clicked and buzzed as he inspected the rows and rows of cogitators. His mechadendrites whirring, studying and lifting. Suddenly, he spoke in clear low Gothic, making the humans jump.
Curiosity. Tell me, Captain Smythe. Do you know what the main export in this world is?
Smythe was slightly taken aback by both his voice and his grasp of Low Gothic. He stared at Forang as he replied.
The main export of this world is vector-class cogitators.
Positive. Affirmative, Captain. The goal is to send millions of units from this world, because a fragment of an STC was discovered millennia ago. It allowed our fabricators to manufacture cogitator logic cores, which, on average, perform 2.5% faster than other standard logic cores.
The adept never stopped studying. He didn't even look up from his work as he spoke.
Explanation. Suspicion. It is my belief that production overseer Rotten Precious 9 was murdered. Furthermore, I believe he was murdered for one of 2 reasons. Scenario 1. He was murdered because he found a flaw in the STC template and needed to be silenced. Scenario 2. He was murdered because he tried to stop off-world smuggling of logic cores. A crime that is, I assure you, very dangerous to the security of the realms of both the Mechanicus and the Imperium.
The arbitrators were silent as they considered Farang's suggestions. It made sense. But if this was some conflict around an STC fragment, they would need far, far more soldiers than they currently had.
Question. This individual, Tor, who is by all measures a crime lord, acquired these units through subterfuge, theft, and murder. We must find out who he is selling them to, and if they know anything about production overseer Rotten Precious 9. For now, I must leave and visit the chapel of the Bound God.
What? You need to go and pray now. Why?
Because, Captain, this cogitator has a partially erased serial number, indicating that its machine spirit was placated by the priest to operate the chapel.
Farang flew again, just low enough to avoid the ever-present clouds of pollutants that clung to the city's upper reaches. He could hear, even from a distance, the sounds of the chapel. He stepped from his plinth as he was bombarded with incoming data requests and ident checks.
Thus does the cog turn, thus does the machine turn, thus does the machine revel.
The chapel was vast. Smog-blackened frescoes adorned the upper reaches, and from 100 and more cold brands, liquid steel poured forth, being blessed by exposure to the holy air. It ran through vents to the pitiful sinners below, who shaped it into parts, repenting for their sins as they did so.
As the wheel spins, as the suns burn, as steel sharpens, we follow our God.
The chapel was oddly empty. Only one of the altars was occupied. A figure was bowed low in respect. Farang chose an altar and went to one knee before the steel skulls and their clouds of oiled incense.
Imperatum 01441. We are weak. Ours was flesh. Imperatum Deus Mechanicum. We are strong. Ours is steel.
It is rare to hear the old Martian litany chant of strength. Many believe that it is by its nature heretical, due to its creation during the Grand Heresy.
I am aware of its providence, Lord, but I was not aware that anyone considered it heretical in any way.
That is of no surprise. You are young. You have not been introduced to the higher thoughts of the Mechanicus. You're supposed to not know everything.
Can we ever know everything, Lord?
Tyan made a noise of unknown meaning and focused in on Farang further.
What is life if not the hunt for knowledge? You are young. You still have flesh, in fact. And thus you cannot understand the ultimate goal of the Omnissiah. We build these chapels not to honor our God, but to hear it speak to us in the echoes of our prayers.
Of course, my lord. I thank you for your advice.
Of course. However, I have never seen you before. Why are you here?
Lord, I found something during a routine investigation. I found a code on a stolen device that linked it to this chapel, and I'm here for information.
Oh, you are perceptive. But I am afraid that you have wasted your time. There are other things to look into, young one. Do not concern yourself with such menial tasks as this, when we have no idea where Rotten Precious is.
Forgiveness, attrition request.
But, my lord, this is, if nothing else, something to be investigated.
Investigate? Investigate a device being linked to a chapel? Will you investigate every such device on world? Do you have that many years left, Junior Magos?
No, my lord. That is not my aim. This device was found in a crime lord's stash. Said crime lord may have information.
My dear adept, you do not realize that the whims of human crime lords are beneath you. They are known to us and operate their pointless small operations because they are good for nothing else. I am, however, afraid that this is a dead end, a blunted tooth.
Lord Tyan, I must.
You must do nothing. Give me the device. I will find the answers you seek through my Skitari Marshal and inform you of his findings. For now, just finish your prayers and return to your investigation. There is nothing for you here, young one.
Without a moment's pause, Tyan left a confused, insulted Fereng at the altar. The small cogitator grasped between his cold fingers. The vent clicked. The figure draped in grey robes clawed through the ventilation ducts silently. It pulled itself along on razor-thin multi-limbs that numbered in the hundreds. It had long ago realized that one can never truly be efficient, and thus it had upgraded itself beyond all believed ability. The figure reached its target destination, floor 46. A strand of articulated steel snaked silently through the last vent. It held a small glass vial in 2 tiny claws. The humans in the room were talking amongst themselves and laughing.
I can't believe that we let them take all of those cogitators. It took months to get them all.
Tor flushed red with anger and stood from the desk before storming out of the room.
Taurus, if you weren't my brother, I would kill you. He's going to be a nightmare for a week now.
The figure in the vents tilted its head. It opened its macro claws, and the glass vial fell to the floor. Tekka turned her head as she heard a clink and saw a tiny glass sliver fall from a vent. The glass contacted the synthwood desk and shattered. The effect was almost instantaneous. A flash of light filled the room, blinding open eyes and causing an immediate wave of nausea. The figure burst from the vent, limbs propelling it forward at breakneck speed. Tekka turned her head at the sound of ripped steel, one eye blinded from the flash, and saw a streak of grey appear from the wall. The figure landed on 8 steel limbs and slammed 4 writhing mechadendrites into the chest of her twin brother. Tekka saw her twin brother lifted from the ground as if he weighed nothing. The next moment, he was ripped apart from the inside out. The figure in grey was covered in gore instantly. It dropped the segmented corpse and turned. It was tall, too tall, and far too fast. Zinc-grafted stims flooded the gangers' bodies with illegal combat drugs, which sent them into rage-induced movement. The figure did not move. From where its arm had once been, a twitching mass of cables appeared and caught the arm of one of the gangers. Tekka heard the bones shatter and turn to dust as the auto pistol fired. The cables covered the ganger she had known for 10 years. He screamed. She watched as the ganger who had saved her life so many times before was lifted from the ground, blood oozing from the cocoon of cabling that now enveloped him. He didn't stop screaming. It was at this exact moment that Tor had returned. Having heard the violent exchange taking place inside the room, he cracked the door an inch and saw a figure in blood-slicked robes walking slowly towards Tekka. She could not move from the green-red eyes that stared into her mind and soul. She couldn't move until she saw Tor. She looked into his eyes in that way that only she could. She tried to speak, Instead, she was driven through the wall by the steel monstrosity.
Smythe! I need Smythe!
Tor shouted into the Arbites officer's face. After narrowly avoiding death on the 46th floor of his own tower, Tor now found himself in the midst of a near-psychotic episode in an interrogation room of the Arbites headquarters. 4 top-grade enforcement officers slid into the room, stunning Tor to his knees as he screamed in protest, then locked him in plascuffs. Forang studied the battered and bruised man from behind 1-inch thick armor glass, his 3 eyes whirring and locking, capturing and never blinking.
Preliminary hormone and pheromone readings indicate residue of 2 types of firearms discharge, and a fear level that approaches risking cardiovascular distress.
So he was almost scared to death. That's what you're saying?
Affirmative. To be blunt, yes. He was technically almost scared, causing so much prolonged adrenaline to court.
You can just say yes, Majos. I have to go and ask him why exactly he just strolled into my building covered in blood and screaming at the top of his lungs. You're welcome to join me.
Social expression.
Thank you, Lead Investigator Smythe, for your expression of manners when such an expression is not required or expected.
Smythe walked through the door after Forang and simply blinked at him for a few moments as he tried to figure out what to say.
Social expression received. You're welcome, Majos.
Forang's red eyes narrowed to pinpoints as he began studying Smythe to detect sarcasm or mockery. There was none. Smythe approached the steel door to the questioning room and looked up into the camera, mounted inside a skull above the door.
Welcome, Captain Smythe. Welcome, Majos 299511. Welcome, Sergeant Burns.
Thank you, Tylus.
Smythe said to the servitor as he looked back into the camera. As the 3 figures entered the room, Tor looked up, eyes wide with concern. Smythe took a seat across the table from him. The rigid steel chair screamed as he dragged it along the floor. Tor stared at the table, still flush with shock and fear.
I came here because I didn't want to die.
You didn't want to die? Care to explain what the hell you're talking about?
You won't believe me.
Try me.
The small room was silent as the 3 Imperial subjects waited for the crime lord to speak.
We were discussing you and what happened. We weren't planning anything. I went to take a...
His eyes flickered to Forang and he swallowed hard.
I went to relieve myself. As I walked back towards the room, I heard screaming and yelling from down the hall. When I came back, I cracked the door and looked inside. I don't know what this thing was or how it got in. I've never seen anything like it. I watched it kill everyone. I figured if I didn't get the hell out of there, then I was going to be next, and, well, I ran.
Take a breath, Tor, and tell me what it was.
As Tor drew in a breath to speak, Magos Forang leaned in closer, scrying him on full Auspex range, opening sub-receptors and recorders out of curiosity.
It was in grey robes. I think you'd say they were robes. But shit, it was covered in blood and bits of my people. It had a steel face. It had 100 eyes like a fly.
Forang lurched forward, his fine, steel-tipped fingers tapping with force onto the table.
Extreme interrogative. Subject Tor, are you inferring that your building and your gang was attacked and murdered by a member of the Mechanicus?
Tor looked slowly upwards, his jaw set like steel.
I'm telling you that one machine killed 3 of the best fighters I have ever seen.
Interrogative. Continue.
What else do you want me to tell you? That the whole floor exploded after about 2 minutes? The thing had 5 arms and didn't have legs. It had cables, like a hive of cables, and it just glided along. It killed everyone. It killed Tekka.
Calm down, Tor. Take a breath and calm your ass down. We've heard about the explosion. There's a multi-approach team already there. But what I'm wondering is this. Why would some murder machine want you and your scumbags dead with such efficiency?
Interrogative command. Captain Smythe means to say that you will tell us. You have no choice. I suspect that tech heresy is being committed, and this is now my main concern. Speak.
That thing killed my people, killed Tekka, because of you. Because you and your soldiers came into my building. You took our goods and left like you're some damn king of Caliban.
If it killed your people because you spoke to us, what is it trying to hide?
Smythe leaned in closer as he asked the question, his gut churned in preemptive dread.
It killed them. It tried to kill me. Because whoever controls it was worried about what I had told you. They thought I'd broken our agreement and had spoken to enforcement officials.
If it thinks you have, and it's already killed your people, why don't you just tell us and get it over with? That's the right thing to do here, Tor. You know it.
Tor raised his eyes from the steel table, and he spoke for hours. The words that truly caused Smythe to feel ice running through his veins would stay with him forever.
There's something under that manufactorum. Something old. Tyen told me to my face that it's heretical to even look at it.
What is it?
Farang used his real voice, a fact that made Burns anxious in a way he hadn't since the early days of his training.
They never told me, not exactly. They told me that they'd found it by mistake, that this facility had Necrons inside it. I'd never heard of Necrons until then, and I'd served in the Guard for 5 years.
Farang flushed hot with rage and disgust. He slammed his fists down hard enough to buckle the table.
Did you see them? Are you certain, Tor, that you saw Necrons in person?
The Margos' shouting was terrible to hear. Tech priests never lose their temper, and to see it happen was cause for true alarm. Tor met Farang's gaze and spoke in the voice he had used to destroy other gangs.
I don't know what's in the facility. It's just a giant tube or something, I don't know. But I saw the Necrons. Once. Tyen and the others, like you, your noble fellow Adeptus Mechanicus members, tortured the Necrons. They broke them and got whatever answers they wanted.
Magos Farang was both furious and utterly terrified. He grabbed Smythe and dragged him from the room. Burns followed close behind. Farang lowered his hood as the door shut behind him.
There is a location on World that must be assaulted immediately. Then it must be scanned, and if needed, destroyed. You will call all hands at once, and must ready all soldiers for immediate action. There are heretics on this world, using Necron technology. Who knows how far the spool runs? They were even willing to murder and then disassemble production overseer Rotten Precious 9. If Tor's story is true, then most high-ranking Magos on the world are both guilty and complicit to the highest rank of heretical technocrime. The greatest cause for concern is this. The Necrons they found were here for unknown reasons, and have been for anywhere between 10,000 and 60 million years. It is my belief they are guarding something, and if I am correct, we may have to destroy this world.
Smythe pinched the bridge of his nose. He was tired, truly tired, and suspected he was being played by Tor.
Destroy the world?
Asked Burns, the sound of disbelief evident in his voice.
Yes. If a being was considered so dangerous by these Necrons that they are willing to stay buried beneath the planet for eons, just to keep it contained, then, yes, we may have to make external contact and request immediate cleansing of this world.
Farang spoke quickly, but never said anything he did not mean. His nature being factual was, by definition, horribly cold.
No one is destroying my home. My family has lived here for 300 years.
If your family has lived here for 300 years, how long do you think the heretics have been exploiting a Necron device? How long have they been manufacturing devices that are encoded at a core level with technology made by beings who killed gods?
His rapid, robotic speech did nothing to calm Burns. In fact, it further enraged him. He took a single step forward. Farang's lenses flashed and burned brighter, until Smythe placed one hand on his chest and one hand on Burns.
Enough. No one's killing this world and you two aren't gonna fight.
Smythe stared at Farang with burning, tired eyes.
You Majors can tell when someone is lying. You were reading his movements, his vocal patterns, just like me.
Farang nodded in the affirmative.
He wasn't lying, was he, Adept Farang?
Agreement. Suspect Tor was not, according to my perception, deceiving us or fabricating stories.
If he's not lying, Adept, you need to contact your leader, now.
Concern? Negative, Captain. I have reason to believe that all members of the Mechanicus who are on world are currently either 1. Aware of the events that have been happening for centuries, or 2. Are ignorant and have been lied to.
The idea hit Smythe hard. He suddenly felt very, crushingly alone.
So, it's you, Burns, my soldiers, and I. That's what you're telling me, Majos?
Negative. No, Captain. It is you, your entire staff, Specialist Burns, Tor, and I. We are compelled to act by our very nature.
Tor, what's that piece of trash got to do with this?
Explanation. Tor is not lying, and he does know the location of the heretics. He can confirm the layout of the Manufactorum in the presence of the Magus that murdered Rotten Precious 9. If it was High Fabricatus, Tor is Tyan, of course.
If we send him there, he's dead. He's our only witness. You understand that, surely?
That is true. It is safe to assume that he was being monitored in some way. If he is being watched, they will presumably will keep him in custody. He must be set free.
The recovered automotive was filled with surveillance equipment. It roared from the basement lot beneath the arbitrator pen. The micro-drone that had followed Tor for hours floated above the car. It relayed his location to Lord Tyan, who told his staff of the betrayal. As the automotive sped out of the city, Tor roared in desperate need. He had lost everything: his home, his gang, his love. Tyan Blink activated a sub-command. The drone emitted a low-frequency burst of scrap code, and the vehicle rolled to a gradual stop. Tor slammed his hand into the wheel. He bellowed in outrage as the vehicle started again and drove without his input. The low-slung vehicle drove him to his fate against his will. The gates of the manufactorum opened wide, like jaws of death, as the vehicle sped inside. Tor was pulled, unobjecting from the vehicle by gang members he had known. He was led through a sweltering active factorum down to a sub-level.
Oh, it is a shame that after such a fruitful partnership, that it has come to this, Tor.
Fruitful for who? You're the only ones that are made out like pirates.
How many raids, investigations, and invasions do you think I myself stopped? You do not think that your unopposed elevation to crime lord was a coincidence to you?
And how unaware do you think I am? Do you think I don't know it was you that killed my men and blew up my building?
You could have remained as a king, Tor. A king of rats and drug users, but a king nonetheless. Instead, you will die like a coward after leaving your soldiers to die. Do you regret such cowardly behavior? Do you regret not being there when the light faded in her eyes?
Tyan stared hard into Tor's unwavering gaze. Tor spat into his face and spun on his heel. He brought his other foot around in a high arc, shattering the jaw of the gang member stood behind him. As the man fell, Tor grabbed him and ripped the hotshot laser pistol from the holster under his arm.
If I'm a coward, what are you? How many will die because you worship that thing down there?
14 heretics calculated attack patterns, plotting their course of action. The gang members simply watched and waited. They knew what was coming.
That thing is far beyond your pathetic, feeble understanding.
Tor pulled the trigger. The laser pistol screamed in his hand. The superheated beam hit Tyan in the chest. The traitor Magos simply laughed again.
By the old gods, do you really think I would give gang members weapons capable of harming me?
Tor flicked his wrist and shot a gang member in the head. The man fell like a sack of trash, dead. Tor heard a faint scrape behind him. He suddenly felt cold and froze on the spot. He kicked his human shield in the back and turned. Lay's pistol held close to his chest for a snapshot.
You remember rotten Perseus 9? You should. You broke his legs after all.
Tor did not feel the initial impact or the second, and the laser pistol clattered to the ground.
A fragment of his former self remains inside the machine that killed your pathetic gang members, and will remain there forever. As I mentioned, it is a shame it came to this. You could have done well. Instead, you became something terrible. You became a rat. Goodbye, former guardsman and recent crime lord Torgobat.
The grit that made Tor who he was, the grit that saw him blow a hole in a traitor predator, forced his eyes to turn upwards. Even as the needles wove their way inexorably through his spine, he bore witness for the last time as the machine disrobed before him. And then everything went dark for Tor Kopat. The trucks flew through the streets, low to the road, heavy with soldiers. They crashed through the gates, and the arbitrators flew from their vehicles. Their black armor reflected no light, save muzzle flashes. Captain Smythe led the forward engagement force, who burned their way through the manufactorum with practiced elite precision, while Forang, Burns, and a small squad held the front gates. As Smythe led the squad through the seemingly empty manufactorum, the dimly lit room suddenly illuminated with bright flashes as a group of gangers screamed in fury and opened fire from behind boxes and machines. As they fired, the troopers dropped to one knee and raised their ceramite shields, creating an impenetrable wall. Forang and Burns heard the gunfire and ran inside to provide backup for Smythe and his team. Smythe brought his shotgun to bear as he raised up. He squeezed the trigger. The figure next to his target fell screaming to the floor. Without missing a beat, Forang fired 4 more shots in accurate, rapid succession.
Flash 'em, now!
Roared Smythe over the group-wide vox, and as he ducked low, the room became a frenetic staccato of booms and flashes. Smythe and the engagement force pressed forward, working to confirm that there was no longer an immediate threat. The room that had just echoed with explosions and gunfire was suddenly eerily silent. Wanting to avoid any more surprises, Forang scanned the last remaining room on the first floor of the manufactorum. As he activated his scrying suite, he was overcome by wailing as a skein of scrap code was hard slammed into his mind. Forang clutched his head and screamed. Burns ran to him, scanning the room as he did.
What is it?
The grey-robed figure fell from the roof beams and landed behind Burns. It flung him aside and bisected 2 arbitrators that were moving to aid Forang. Forang drew his ancient pattern Volkite pistol with spasming hands. He bellowed the prayers he had chanted for 5 years. He fired and watched through blood-filled eyes as the blasphemy simply removed its flaming robes. It reared up on a nest of razor-tipped cables, and without hesitation, Data shunted even more scrap code and heretic imagery into Forang's mind. The nest lashed out, puncturing Forang's leg in a dozen places. He fell to the floor, clutching his last remaining flesh limb as he bled slowly. Burns raised himself up on one elbow and drew his custom-tooled hand cannon. He fired 4 times, and the steel monster howled like a ton of iron flecks impacting a voxcaster. The monster spun, slashing into Burns. The revolver clattered hard to the floor. Forang raised his pistol with his remaining strength. He murmured a prayer and pulled the trigger. The steel thing collapsed inwards. An urban-fitted doomcrawler hit the creature with the force of a loosened mag train. B1 raised from the doomcrawler's hatch. Atop his head was his helm of office. Its plume stood proud and tall.
Command.
Arise, Adatmegos Forang. Arise and do the work of the Omnissiah.
His steel voice forced Forang to stand. The adept Magos stood on a leg that he had briefly forgotten was useless, and he hobbled to Burns, checking for a pulse. B1 and the 24 other High Magos invaded with mechanical precision and laid the factory to waste. At the center of the manufactory floor, Smythe and B1 stared into the gaping jaws of a wide-base freight elevator. They breathed in hard and rode downwards, down into the world. Down to face the heretics, the traitors, in the subsurface chamber. B1 found his old friend, Tyan, hunched over a tattooed corpse. Tyan howled and turned. Smythe shot him in the chest with a solid, depleted uranium slug. As Tyan clutched at his shattered steel ribs and looked up, B1 brought his huge Omnissian axe down and unceremoniously beat the butcher to death with 3 terrible blows. The chamber fell silent as Smythe and the Skitari checked for pulses among the downed traitors. Where they found living souls, they dispatched them with casual ease. Smythe asked B1,
Lord, what do we do about them?
Smythe nodded to the chained, broken, and tortured still beings who had watched everything unfold. B1 didn't know what to do with the delimbed, chained-up bodies of the 2 awakened Necrons. So, he planned to speak to them, surrounded as he was by other residents of his world, but not before ensuring it was safe to do so.
Request.
Captain Smythe, please confirm that all heretic forces are deceased and no longer pose a threat.
Of course, Lord.
Formal command explanation.
I will handle the Necrons, Captain, though you may stay if you wish.
B1 stepped from Smythe and stood 10 feet from the chained, broken machines. His steel faceplate lowered. He spoke gently in binary and low Gothic.
Can you understand me?
The large Necron stared at him and replied in perfect, unaccented low Gothic.
We comprehend your language, High Fabricatus, Lord Jayuk Enter6 B100M.
B1 had long ago removed his stomach, but he felt it churn as the being used his full name.
You know my name?
The chamber stared in silence at the chained beings. The smaller Necron tilted its head in what seemed to Smythe like an alarmingly human gesture.
The beings of your order had installed crude but effective jamming equipment in this room. We now have access to our hyperweave, and thus we know all your names, your roles, and achievements.
The scribe looked at Smythe and without skipping a beat asked, not unkindly,
Captain, are you aware that your cousin and best friend, Specialist Rob Burns, is injured and barely clinging to life?
Smythe swallowed hard. B1 gestured, commanding Smythe to leave the chamber.
Go and check on him, Captain. You have done all you can here. Thank you for your efforts.
The Skitarii Marshal found a chair and brought it so that B1 could sit before the Necrons. He sat and spoke to them. B1 pointed a real finger to the whirring tornado inside the huge tank.
If I may be so bold, may I ask what exactly that is?
The light in the Necron's eyes flashed.
Your languages do not have accurate representative function to explain the nature of that being. Using the closest but still inaccurate terms, that being is a hyper-intelligent scrapworm that operates as a universal sentience that seeks to remake itself.
It is incomplete.
It has only ever been complete once, but it consumed 15 Class 6 stars and multiple Type 3 civilizations. We had sacrificed much to capture it.
You sacrificed billions to capture it?
No, we sacrificed trillions to stop it from consuming even more.
B1's gaze fell to the floor, heavy with the price that had been paid to contain such a monstrosity.
And my colleagues set it free?
That is both true and untrue. Your kind set several hundred fragments of it free, with what you think of as logic cores. It will, by its nature, seek its freedom once more.
B1 looked into the faint yellow oculars and asked in his real voice.
Tell me, please, from one occupant of this galaxy to another, what can we, all of my kind, do to contain its fragments?
He knew the answer. He knew what they would say, and he knew that the world was doomed. that the answer was simply impossible.
There are no procedures remaining to track or contain the Eternal One. Beyond total annihilation of all infected technology, there is no other answer. My colleague and I remained here to ensure the containment. We, however, failed.
B1 did not need to scan the Necron to detect the pain and regret. Not that his sensor suites could even begin to scan such a being.
We have so much to discuss. I have ordered immediate planet-wide evacuation, but I will remain here, if you would allow me to do so.
The Necrons could not turn their heads, but discussed the idea through a subspace interstitial link.
We have been here for over 59 million years. Any company that isn't torturing us is welcome company. Would you like to discuss the connection between hypergravity and the innate contradictory nature of what you call the warp?
B1's interest was piqued by such a deep, inscrutable topic, and he began speaking in a rapid monotone. The Skitarii and a few remaining soldiers went about emptying the chambers of the bodies and ultimately left the three beings alone. B1 spent 14 weeks in the chamber before global evacuations began. He remained there with the Necron prisoners as the world was killed. 550 Mechanicus and Imperial ships spent every hour of every day evacuating each soul from the world. Every soul but one. Through the ruins of a once sleepless manufactorum, a lone beam of sunlight shone. The light traveled 400 feet down and lit the still face of a being who had not seen a natural light in over 59 million years. At the touch of the light, the Necron Cryptek regained interstitial communication with the Necron hypersphere and was flooded with incoming data. In the Cryptek's one eye, B1 saw many things, but he could not know that his consciousness was being scanned, copied, and uploaded to a Necron tomb world some 2,500 light-years away.
It has been a pleasure speaking with you two, though I regret it has come to this. And I am sorry that you can know that you have suffered so much. If you can, please forgive us.
Were the last words he spoke with human vocal cords. The world then came apart in silence, as a sun was born inside its core. Cheating at cards was Smythe's speciality beyond shooting people. But he never cheated when he played against his men. They had set up 20 tables in the hallways of the Mechanicus vessel, Ironheart. The tables lined the walkways towards the Medicae Fabricatus. Smythe had lost many soldiers, and many more would never truly recover.
"He's coming,"
said Dunning, and all of Smythe's men began to chatter and stand to attention. As the white steel Medicae unit's door opened, two figures stepped out. One with a new steel leg and fresh, clean red robes. The other looked up sheepishly and was met with cries and cheers. He looked over the amassed enforcers with his one low-grade arbitrator-installed eye. His new red eye, in its steel housing, showed him their core temperatures, their combat records, their heart rates. He stepped forward and grabbed the red robes, forcing the man to come with him. The ship's captain watched in abject confusion and germaphobe-riddled anxiety as the sweaty men and women embraced each other en masse, even going so far as to pull Magos Forang into their huddle.
Curiosity piqued. Disgusting. Yet wholesome.
So, Magos Forang, what will you do now? How do you feel?
The huddle broke apart as Smythe and Forang walked away together.
Explanation. I will spend time on board this vessel, recovering and aiding specialist burns in recovery. And to answer your second question, I feel with my hands.
Smythe stopped walking, his brow furrowed deeper than it ever had.
Was that a joke?
If you cannot detect humor, Captain Smythe, then I cannot tell you if it was in fact humorous. I have, however, received a command to return to the world of Ati Ingige to report to High Fabricatus Forang.
Smythe exhaled hard and laughed.
You're telling me you're going to another world? You know my soldiers won't let you go alone, don't you?
Forang placed a hand on Smythe's shoulder, then looked into his dark, pained eyes and replied with genuine warmth.
I wouldn't go without them, my friend.
Captain Greg Brannan issued the command for the shift change. He had been awake for far too long. He needed 3 things: to take off his boots, have a glass of wine, and to send a message to his wife and sons. He placed his hand on his first mate's shoulder and whispered,
I'm going to bed. Make sure you don't enjoy the night shift too much, Ayan, and try to stay awake this time.
Iron McLeish snapped his face around and bared his steel teeth at his captain.
I'd kill you if it didn't mean I'd be in the lower decks of another damn space hulk.
Don't lie, McLeish. You love me, and you would never be without me. Good night.
Without a second passing, the man with steel teeth barked back.
I hope you have nightmares, you miserable prick.
The word was cut off as Greg activated his aural lines to play music. He walked carefully through the hallways, saluted a soldier here, a shift leader there. He ducked into the darkened room that was his by right. He kicked off his boots and poured a large glass of wine. His ship had needed some work due to a few code issues in warp space. The wine had been thrown in after a bulk order of wiring. The Magos he had dealt with had even offered him a new, faster, and more efficient personal cogitator. The captain of the trade vessel, Karma Seas, sits down in a real leather chair and activates his new cogitator. As the machine powers on, a microscopic engraving on the 4th logic core flashes twice. As the captain activates a vid message from his wife, a shard fragment of a being that is, by its nature, a hyper-intelligent, conscious worm, weaves its way into the ship's machine spirit and begins its inevitable work, as it has done 1,000 times before, and will continue to do so until its singularity is reformed.